This is an NBC News special report. Here's Lester Holt.
Good day. We're coming on the air with breaking news and a major breakthrough in the Middle East. Multiple sources telling NBC News that Israel and Hamas have reached a ceasefire deal to pause the fighting in Gaza and eventually release dozens of hostages taken during the October 7th attack. It comes after more than a year of brutal fighting in the Middle East, which began with the Hamas terror attack that killed more than 1,200 people in Israel, and Israel's massive retaliation that has killed more than 46,000 people in Gaza. That's according to the health ministry there, and led to a humanitarian crisis. Let's go straight to our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel. Richard, you're in Jerusalem now. What else do we know about this deal?
So this is a moment that this country has been waiting for, the people of Gaza has been waiting for. According to multiple sources in Hamas, inside Israel, in the United States, at the White House, a deal has been reached between Hamas and the Israeli government, brokered mainly by Qatar, also with significant U.S. involvement, to reach a ceasefire. This would be a gradual deal that would see fighting initially slow down and eventually stop in Gaza in exchange for the release of hostages who've been held by Hamas for about 15 months now. The Israeli government believes there are 98 hostages held by Hamas. It is not sure how many of them are still alive. But Lester, it is important for people to know this is not a quick deal. Even though there is this agreement, according to multiple sources, first of all, there has been no official statement. We are expecting that perhaps tonight, perhaps in the next few hours, and then the deal will have to be rolled out. It begins with a period of calm to build trust, and then Hamas will release hostages in batches. It is talking about releasing them 3 at a time initially. In the first stage, 33 hostages would be released. They are being described as the humanitarian cases, the hostages who are elderly, injured, sick in any way. Some of the hostages are described as being in quite poor health. If that is successful, they would move on to the next phase. And this initial phase could take 42 days. So this, Lester, is a very slow period. The next phase, if the first phase is successful, would see Hamas released all of the remaining hostages, including soldiers and military-aged males. A lot of room for this to go wrong, but certainly a historic moment that could see potentially an end to this conflict, an end to the suffering of the people in Gaza. Because in exchange for the release of these hostages over time, Israeli troops would pull back from population centers in Gaza. They would establish a buffer zone around the Gaza Strip and release hundreds of Palestinian prisoners and allow much more aid into the Gaza Strip, hundreds of trucks per day. Lester.
All right, Roger, I'll ask you to stand by. Let's talk about how we got here. Correspondent Raf Sanchez, who covers the region, is joining me now. Raf, what do we know about how the pieces are coming together?
Well, Lester, this deal was finally sealed after marathon negotiations in Doha, Qatar, mediated by the prime minister of that country. And these talks have been touch and go right up until the very last minute. We started getting indications on Monday that the two sides were close. And earlier today, the cameras were up and rolling at the foreign ministry in Qatar. The Qataris preparing to announce this agreement, and then there was what appears to be a last-minute hitch. According to the Israeli government, Hamas adding last-minute demands to do with Israeli forces withdrawing from the Egypt-Gaza border. The Prime Minister of Qatar, who we are expecting to see in front of those cameras potentially any minute now, going back into his office with the delegation from Hamas and finally getting that deal over the line. What has been very notable, Brett McGurk, President Biden's most senior Middle East advisor, has been camped out in Qatar for around 10 days now, but he has been joined by Steve Witkoff, who is President-elect Trump's incoming Middle East envoy. And these two Americans representing the current administration and the incoming administration have been, according to the White House, working hand in hand, sending the message not just to Qatar, but also to Israel Israel and Hamas that this is a bipartisan push, that any deal that is sealed under the Biden administration will be pushed forward by the Trump administration. And of course, Lester, we have heard from President-elect Trump repeatedly in recent weeks saying that if there is not a deal in place by the time of his inauguration on January 20th, there will be, in his words, hell to pay. He never spelled out exactly what those consequences were, but multiple officials say that deadline really helped focus minds, and it helped push these negotiations to the point where now, just days before that deadline, it does appear that a deal is in place. I asked Jake Sullivan, President Biden's national security advisor, last month in Tel Aviv, how big a role President-elect Trump's pressure had played. He acknowledged that there was good communication between the teams. The other point he made about why is it that a deal has been able to be reached now but wasn't able to be reached before, he said the ceasefire in Lebanon, which ended the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah back in November, really brought Hamas closer to the table. It led them to a point where they concluded that they had to reach a deal. Prime Minister Netanyahu also appears to have really been feeling that pressure from President-elect Trump. He is under a lot of pressure from the far right of his own government not to end this war, but it does appear now that he has also signed on to this deal. We do expect Israel's security cabinet will have to vote to approve this agreement. Lester, the tragedy in some ways is the deal that does appear to be emerging from Qatar now does not seem to be significantly different from those broad outlines laid out by President Biden on May 31st. But a very large number of Palestinian civilians and at least some hostages have lost their lives in the months since then.